name is Tara Gladden. I am the Director and Curator for the Kohl Gallery at Washington College. Today I'm speaking with Drake Harrison, who is a graduating senior, and he has created some new work as part of our Senior Capstone Exhibition in Studio Art, which this year seniors have decided on the title Unsettled. So hello, Drake. How are
Hi,
you? Hanging in
I'm
there?
good. It's
Good.
been a busy week.
Yeah, I bet. So, how has your process been coming along?
Uh, it's been interesting because this is my first time working with plaster, so it's definitely been a learning experience with that. But it's kind of interesting, kind of experimenting as you go along.
Great. Okay. Well, I would love to ask you to just start by introducing the work that you are showing in Unsettled, and maybe show us some images and tell us a little bit about it.
Of course. So the title of this series is Artifacts of the Anthropocene. Um, and basically, the premise is that using a computer program that uses artificial intelligence to generate images, specifically images of artifacts that might be found in like the Met collection. Um, I will take some of those images and recreate them in real life, basically create replicas of them. Uh, so let me see if I can pull up some of those. So this is actually one of the computer generated images. Um, and so it was a bit of a challenge trying to like figure out how do I translate this into something physical. Um, so there's
Hmm.
this is one of the objects that I created. And yeah, it's just a matter of trying to, work with the plaster. And I think it's been interesting seeing these things that, don't exist, and bringing them out into the physical world. Um, and also like applying my own sort of like creative liberties with these computer generated images. Um, Let me see if I can bring up some new examples. Some of them seem more like things that you would almost expect to see in a museum, like this piece right here.
And are we looking at the computer? We're looking at the computer generated image,
This
right?
is, yes, this is the computer generated image.
Okay.
So this was a bit of a fun challenge, kind of creating something that feels like it like belongs,
Hmm.
something that you would conventionally see. Um, Others were a little bit weirder. So this one is like almost unrecognizable as to what function or what it's from. So that was an interesting challenge, but also a little bit fun because you don't really have a frame of reference. You can kind of go in a different direction. And to recreate this, I actually used 3D printing. Let me pull it up.
Yeah, I can see that, the 3D printed objects. Object.
Yeah, and so that I really like playing with that sort of like mixing contemporary materials and like traditional media like plaster. Um, so that's always a really rewarding experience.
Yeah, it's interesting as I'm looking at these, and I'm thinking about your process. It's almost as if, so we've got the one layer of, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's one layer of coding that happens, right? So there's
Yeah.
all of these choices that you need to make in terms of what kind of information do you want to source?
Yeah.
Is that correct? So you kind of begin with setting up some parameters,
hmm
and
The,
then you build a program that processes that information in order to create these objects. And then from there, uh, you're recreating the objects. And it occurs to me that there are several layers of translation happening. So like the translation of your thoughts and these parameters, into code, that then that code gets translated into visual material, and then that visual material undergoes, another process of like the artist's hand. So you're then translating like a screen-based image into an actual image. So have you thought about that, like the idea of translation? Or I don't know, am I off base with that, or is that something that you've thought about?
yeah, that was a big thing of like what made it so interesting because like the idea of like almost playing this weird game of telephone was really interesting to me. I was like seeing how how the translation gets like more and more off. In this case, there were only sort of like two or three components like you described, but just the way that you can't exactly replicate this computer generated image or just the limitations of like you're a little bit off with the sculpting or that sort of thing. And I think it gives it more character and like it's interesting to see where like the physical diverges from the digital.
Yeah, and as you're speaking, it makes me think about in your bio, you say, your art deals with these contradictory kinds of forces, and you're working through processes that often might seem like they're at odds with one another. So would you say, it also seems that you're interested in the contradiction between, or the different questions that surround a computer generated something, generating an image versus the human hand constructing an image, and the contradictions that exist between those two kinds of expression. So like as someone who's engaging in the whole entire process from the beginning to the end, from like the thought process, the conceptual thought process of figuring out, that set of parameters that we talked about, through the process of then translating, this information into something physical. Is there a conflict within you that you're trying to get at? This question of, who's making it? Am I making it? What do you think about those kinds of ideas, and how do they play into what you're doing?
Yeah, it's definitely strange because like I feel like as an artist, the the way that I work has been flip flopped. Like um, normally you have your concept in your head and you bring that to life with your own like skill and you kind of have control over this. But the having the original image that you're trying to recreate be generated by something non-human, not even you, kind of strips away that control. Makes it almost a process where the idea came like outside of your influence, and trying to you're just basically this like drone trying to recreate it. That was kind of an interesting feeling, not having that control over the initial idea.
But I'm curious. I am curious to know more about the idea of control, because my understanding is that, the computer doesn't create the set of parameters itself. You create those parameters, correct? I mean, aren't you setting up a set like in a sense, you're telling the computer what to do. You're telling a program what to do, what to search for, what to synthesize. And it seems to me like there's a lot of artistry that goes into that whole line of thinking. I guess the question has to do with, at what point does computer science conceptual thought become art, so to speak. I think it's a very, very fine line. And I guess my question for you is, do you think it's a fine line, or it seems like you're trying to differentiate between the work. Like you're not quite convinced possibly that what you're doing as a computer scientist is art. I'm not, I very much think it is actually, but I'm curious, like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that, like, to an extent, the concept of you know putting this data into the program, and I'm going to take whatever images come out of that and reproduce them. That concept, I do consider that to be like part of the initial art and all of that. But the exact process and the amount of control that me as a programmer has over the like generation of those images, um, it's kind of a black box. You really only have control over the um, the data that you're putting in, which is, I want it to generate images of cars or faces or art objects. But the decisions that it makes to generate those images, you know, what sort of like colors it puts in, what the composition is, what general shape is, that's all determined as this program learns.
I see. So there are a significant amount of, there's a lot that is not in you're only in control of so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the projects, I see, I understand now. The project's playing with those, with the limits of control, and then adding this extra process onto then creating that object with your own, with your own hands into like an actual physical object.